For generations, the world has idolized Bob Marley as a universal emblem of peace, rebellion, and spiritual strength. But behind the iconic image stood a man and a family, scarred in ways that few have truly understood. The public saw the legend. His family lived the reality. When we first started creating music, it was my father who guided us, shares Ziggy Marley, the eldest child of Bob and Rita Marley. Now, after years of silence, Ziggy is finally opening up, and what he reveals strikes at the heart of the Marley mythos. What unfolded within their home wasn't just dramatic fodder for tabloids. It was far darker. According to Ziggy, what happened there changed everything. "She killed him," he says. And though those words cut deep, the context behind them is far more layered. Ziggy was only 12 when his father passed, but the burden of legacy and of loss has followed him ever since. The grief never vanished. It simply became part of his being. Let's delve into what Ziggy Marley has finally chosen to reveal about his father. A life shaped by trauma, silence, and survival. Few dare to shed light on the darkest chapters of their upbringing, but for Ziggy Marley, confronting the chaos he was raised in is more than therapeutic. It's a way to offer clarity. It provides the world with a raw, unfiltered view of the real Bob Marley. And among those memories, one in particular remains etched in his mind. He was only 8 years old when his world shattered. The Marley household wasn't only a space filled with rhythms and melodies, it became a target. In December 1976, the unthinkable happened. Bob Marley, along with his wife Rita and their children, became victims of an armed assault at their Kingston, Jamaica home. Tensions across the country were nearing a critical point, and Bob, willingly or not, had become a symbol of hope, transformation, and resistance. That made him a threat to some, and a target to others. The night the bullets flew, chaos took over. The children were yanked from their beds. Fear replaced sleep. Ziggy vividly recalls the night. "The police came for us kids in the dead of night and took us to a secret hideout in the hills. No one really knew what was going on. It was terrifying, but also a bit exciting." That surreal mix of fear and awe stuck with him. But beneath the surface excitement, the danger was all too real. It wasn't just a story. It was a deep psychological wound. His parents were nearly murdered. Bob had been shot in the chest and arm. Rita had a bullet lodged in her head. And yet, astonishingly, just 2 days later, both appeared at the Smile Jamaica concert. Bandaged and battered, they still performed. The show, originally planned to promote unity amid Jamaica's growing unrest, went on as scheduled. To the outside world, this was an act of bravery. But to the young Ziggy, it was terrifyingly personal. That moment didn't look like courage. It looked like trauma. It was there, amid the violence and resilience, that Ziggy began to truly understand who his father was. Bob Marley wasn't just a father or a musician. He was a man caught in the crossfire of politics, culture, and survival. The Marley home wasn't merely a cradle of music. It was a battlefield, and Ziggy was just a child living in the storm, watching his parents dodge bullets and play through pain. Until now, Ziggy had rarely revisited that night in such graphic and emotional depth. But the weight of carrying his father's legend has compelled him to let go of the illusion and confront the raw truth. He's no longer guarding the myth. He's sharing the reality, what it meant to be raised in conflict while the rest of the world cheered on a hero. "People adore my father, but he wasn't always peaceful. He had violent instincts. He was a fighter," Ziggy states without hesitation. It's a dimension of Bob Marley that the world often avoids. Most remember the philosophical poet singing about harmony and love. But Ziggy's account paints a more complex portrait. A man formed in adversity, a soul constantly wrestling with inner and outer battles. The simplified version of Bob Marley's life, the dreadlocked prophet singing about peace, is far from the full story. Yes, he sang about one love, but he lived surrounded by conflict, both inside himself and in the streets that raised him. Born and raised in Trenchtown, survival required more than talent. It demanded a hardened will. That's where Bob's unyielding nature was born. The name Tough Gong wasn't just a catchy nickname. It was earned on the streets. It was a badge of survival, resilience, and a reputation for standing one's ground. Ziggy isn't trying to tarnish his father's image. He's seeking to show it in full. Bob wasn't gentle by nature. He was intense, fierce, and deeply scarred by experience. And sometimes, that intensity showed itself in anger. At home, that drive didn't fade when the music stopped. Ziggy watched his father channel his raw energy into anything that demanded motion. Sports, running, boxing. The passion that fueled reggae classics didn't simply disappear when the instruments were set down. It transformed into something else. Something physical. Something unstoppable. Ziggy Marley remembers his father's passion vividly, not just for music, but for competition. He was obsessed, Ziggy admits. It was a huge part of his world, and by extension, part of mine. Bob Marley wasn't merely a fan of sports, he was completely immersed in them. He embraced all forms of physical activity with fervor. It was more than a hobby, it was therapy. Whether it was a simple match or a spontaneous game, Bob couldn't just watch from the sidelines. Ziggy recalls how his father would often show up at his elementary school and immediately join the kids on the field. He wouldn't hesitate to dive into the action, playing football with the same intensity he gave the stage. He had speed and a powerful kick, Ziggy chuckles. That's what he really loved. This image, Bob Marley dashing across a dusty school field, chasing a football among school children, might jar with the serene, messianic figure revered by millions. But to Ziggy, that version was far more genuine than the legend. It was grounding and human. Yet, that authenticity came with its own burdens. As Bob's stardom swelled, so did the demands and the expectations that came crashing in with it. Ziggy remembers how the world pulled at his father from every direction. Fans wanting his time, strangers asking for money, associates needing his attention or allegiance. The calm, enlightened persona that Bob projected on stage didn't always follow him home. Football gave him peace, Ziggy says. It was how he cleared his head. Still, even his beloved sport couldn't always release the mounting pressure. Because while Bob Marley was carrying the hopes of a generation on his shoulders, he was also carrying private burdens, especially within his marriage to Rita Marley. Behind the revolutionary music and global fame, the relationship between Bob and Rita Marley was layered and difficult. Built upon both affection and anguish, their bond was one forged in loyalty, but also deeply scarred by betrayal and emotional fatigue. Now, after decades of maintaining silence, Ziggy Marley is choosing to speak candidly about what he witnessed growing up in their household. And he's not interested in dressing it up. His version of their marriage doesn't resemble a poetic love story. It's a portrait of two people bound by shared purpose, infidelity, fame, illness, and constant evolution. Bob fathered children with numerous women during his life. That much is publicly known and widely accepted as part of his story. But what people never fully grasped was the emotional fallout that rippled through the family. Rita Marley stood beside Bob through it all, not just as his wife, but as a vital part of his musical and managerial world. She handled his business affairs, performed by his side, and when illness overtook him, she transformed into his primary caregiver. Yet, Ziggy doesn't sugarcoat what it cost. In a particularly raw and painful reflection, he confesses, "She killed him emotionally and spiritually." That revelation isn't meant to villainize. It's the grief of a son trying to make sense of what he saw. It speaks to a house full of unspoken pain, smothered emotions, and a love that slowly fractured under the weight of fame, deception, and heartbreak. Rita, too, was unfaithful at times. The betrayal didn't flow only in one direction. And yet, in spite of the wounds, something resembling loyalty remained. A kind of twisted devotion that lingered even after the romantic threads had frayed. Bob, by Ziggy's account, was fiercely possessive. He didn't want other men glancing at Rita, all while living a life where women came and went. That contradiction fueled a toxic dynamic, a bond kept alive not by idealism, but by defiance and duty. When Bob's health deteriorated, it was Rita Marley who shouldered the full weight of that final descent. According to those close to the family, she was ever present, managing not just logistics, but the emotional wreckage. The love may have waned, but history held them together. In the end, what remained between them was not romance, but a complicated closeness, an unshakable sense of shared legacy and endurance. Ziggy's reflections forced the world to see beyond the myth. Bob wouldn't have been who he was without Rita, he affirms. That statement, simple as it is, carries immense depth. Their relationship defied labels. It wasn't conventionally beautiful, but it was deeply real. It was shaped by survival, music, and a willingness to stand beside one another, even when the love that first brought them together had long faded. For the first time, Ziggy Marley is giving the world an unfiltered look into the truth of his family's life. The legacy of Bob Marley was never just about music. It was built atop personal sacrifices, spiritual contradictions, and a household shaped by love, betrayal, survival, and silence. Their story didn't end in harmony. It ended in unresolved pain and a son watching the foundation of his world unravel in the aftermath of gunfire and global reverence. After surviving the harrowing shooting in Kingston, Bob Marley made his way to London, a city that, for a while, became his sanctuary. Nestled in the quiet confines of 42 Oakley Street in Chelsea, he finally found the peace his soul had been aching for. Removed from the escalating violence of Jamaica and the suffocating weight of political expectations, Bob was given the rare opportunity to recover, both physically and mentally. London offered him a breath of stillness. In that silence, he began to create again. From within that brief refuge emerged one of his most beloved and uplifting tracks, Three Little Birds, with its now iconic refrain, "Don't worry about a thing, 'cause every little thing is gonna be all right." The song became a soothing balm for a weary world. But to Ziggy Marley, those lyrics carried a much more complex emotional charge. While Bob was composing messages of comfort for the masses, his own children remained in Jamaica, left to navigate the trauma of the recent attack and adapt to a new version of life, one in which their father was no longer present in the way they needed him to be. Ziggy, just 8 years old at the time, stayed behind in the aftermath. As his father processed his pain overseas, Ziggy faced the daily rhythms of school, routine, and a household permanently altered by violence. He doesn't share these memories with bitterness, but his voice carries the weight of understanding hardened by time. When you think back on it, yeah, it's sad, Ziggy reflects. But at the time, you just do what needs to be done. There were obligations, routines, and realities that didn't pause for grief. He simply carried on. The gap between father and son wasn't only measured in miles, it was felt in emotional absence. Ziggy Marley didn't experience a typical childhood filled with constant bonding. His father was often away, whether on tour, immersed in studio sessions, or, during this pivotal period, thousands of miles away living an entirely separate existence. And even when Bob was present, he wasn't just a father. He was Bob Marley, the living legend. For a child, that kind of colossal presence often leaves behind a deep and invisible absence. Ziggy doesn't offer blame. He doesn't lash out. But he does, for the first time, articulate the truth he once buried. His father was absent, at key moments, in crucial stages of growing up, and that absence had consequences. It's a soft-spoken revelation, but it reverberates with emotional gravity. While Bob was healing and creating songs that uplifted a planet, his son was quietly learning how to carry on without him. That distance didn't destroy Ziggy. It shaped him. It forced him to develop strength, independence, and resilience. While the world gained Three Little Birds, Ziggy bore the quiet sorrow of a child longing for his father's return. It was a trade-off neither chose, but one that defined both of their lives. Now, years later, Ziggy is acknowledging what that separation truly cost. Today, Ziggy Marley is a force in his own right. With 8 Grammy Awards to his name, he's built a legacy of success. He's a devoted husband, a father to 4 children, a humanitarian, and an artist who's earned both critical and popular acclaim. Yet, for all of his accomplishments, there's one reality that continues to loom large. He remains, in the eyes of the world, his father's son. The Marley name is no ordinary name. It's a global brand, a cultural symbol, a torch passed from one generation to the next. And while Ziggy has never tried to run from it, stepping out of that immense shadow has proven to be one of the most difficult parts of his journey. No matter how high he rises, the echoes of Bob Marley's legacy are always just behind him. Even as he carves out his own narrative, people often view Ziggy's success as a continuation of the Marley mythos, not as a distinct story of its own. That reality comes with pride, but also with a deep, sometimes unspoken challenge. It's as though the world doesn't always see Ziggy Marley the man. They see the son of a legend. Still, Ziggy continues to walk that line with grace. He honors his father's legacy while forging ahead on his own path, knowing full well the complexity of the heritage he carries. He has transformed the weight of that name into fuel for creativity, activism, and fatherhood. And in doing so, he is slowly, steadily, becoming a legend in his own right. Now residing in Los Angeles, far from the Jamaican roots where his journey began, Ziggy Marley still speaks with the unmistakable rhythm and intonation of Trenchtown, a sound that once shaped the very essence of his father Bob Marley's voice. It's not just the accent, it's the rhythm, the soul, the cultural inheritance embedded in every word he utters. But what he also carries, beyond the sound, is the immense responsibility of a legacy. No matter what city or country he steps into, every stage he performs on still feels, in part, like it belongs to Bob. Every time his name is written in a headline, it's often followed, either subtly or explicitly, by a reference to his legendary father. People always expect me to sing Bob Marley covers during my concerts, Ziggy admits. And honestly, I'm happy to do that. There's no bitterness in his tone, but as his silence finally breaks, it becomes clear that honoring a legacy is an entirely different journey than living in its shadow. At times, Ziggy has chosen to embrace that legacy fully. He's embarked on full tours, where the only music performed has been his father's. These performances aren't obligations, they're heartfelt tributes. Still, the emotional cost of these moments shouldn't be underestimated. The songs aren't just hits from a global icon. They are fragments of a personal story, reminders of a bond severed far too early. One track, above all, continues to hit with the force of a memory. Redemption Song. That one holds a lot of emotional weight for me, Ziggy shares. When Bob Marley passed, it was the song echoing across the airwaves. It became both a national anthem for mourning and a deeply intimate reflection of loss. To this day, decades later, performing it still opens old emotional wounds. Ziggy understands that to the world, he's more than a musician. He's a symbol of continuity, the living bridge between what was and what remains. He accepts this responsibility with poise, but doesn't hide the challenge it brings. When I smile, I'm honoring him. When I laugh, it's his laugh echoing through me, he says. These fragments of his father, the gestures, the expressions, the voice, live on in him, whether he claims them or not. By choosing to speak out now, Ziggy isn't pushing away from his father's memory. He's simply shedding light on its complexity. He is not just the heir to a musical empire. He's a man who, in private, watched the world worship a figure he simply knew as Dad. While millions were grieving a legend, Ziggy Marley was a child trying to hold on to pieces of a man he barely got the chance to know. Even today, he says, those pieces still live on in his own songs, in his children, in the way he talks, and the way he carries himself, even when the public feels that those traits belong to Bob, not to him. There remains one brief, haunting moment that Ziggy has carried in his heart, one that belongs solely to him and his father. It was a fleeting but deeply significant exchange during Bob Marley's final days, and it left an imprint no audience ever witnessed. Ziggy was only 12 years old when he caught his final glimpse of his father through a hospital window. Bob, frail and rapidly deteriorating, locked eyes with his son and motioned for him to come inside. In a soft voice, he greeted him. "Hey, well, young Bob, I've got a song for you." Then came the final words, simple, profound, and unforgettable. "On your way up, take me up. On your way down, Don't let me down. That moment, brief as it was, became the spiritual thread that connected Ziggy to his father from that day forward. It wasn't just a farewell, it was a charge, a legacy wrapped in a single sentence. And ever since, Ziggy has been living by those words, trying to uplift the memory of his father while forging a path that is uniquely his own. What passed between Bob Marley and his son in those final days wasn't a conventional goodbye. There were no long embraces or emotional farewells. Bob's parting words weren't laced with sentimentality. Instead, they were charged with something far heavier, a transfer of responsibility. In that quiet moment, a dying father wasn't merely saying goodbye to his child. He was entrusting him with a future, a name, and a mission. To Ziggy Marley, those words didn't just offer guidance. They laid a burden across his shoulders that he has carried in silence for decades. Only now is he beginning to unpack what that moment truly meant. For so long, he kept it buried. But in breaking that silence, he allows a deeper truth to emerge. He's been bearing that weight alone ever since. Not long after that final hospital visit, Ziggy found himself in Miami, spending time with his grandmother. That's where the unspoken truth finally caught up with him. There was no official announcement. No one looked him in the eye and said the words, "Your father has passed." Instead, it came in the subtlest and most heartbreaking way, through a glimpse at his sister's face. He recalls seeing her expression and instantly knowing what had happened. No words were needed. In that frozen moment, the world shifted. He confesses now to something he's never shared publicly before. In the haze of grief, Ziggy struck a private bargain with God. He pleaded silently, "Just let me see him one more time and I'll be a good boy." But that second chance never came. It was the plea of a young boy grappling with loss, trying to rewrite a reality that had already unfolded. What he didn't realize was that by the time he whispered that promise to the universe, his father was already gone. As Ziggy reflects on those final days, a new layer of sorrow surfaces, not directed at Bob, but at those who surrounded him. He had people around him, Ziggy says now, but I don't believe they were the right people. His voice grows firm with a hint of anger. He was overworked. He was unwell, and no one stepped in to make him rest. No one stopped it. No one told him to slow down and heal. It's not a scandalous accusation. It's a deeply personal lament, one born from watching his father deteriorate, not in tranquility, but amidst chaos, expectation, and exhaustion. "I don't respect that," Ziggy adds with quiet intensity. There's a wish buried in his words, a longing to have been there, to have been old enough to offer better advice. "If I had been around," he says, "maybe I could have told him what he needed to hear. Maybe it would have made a difference." There's no anger at his father, only grief at what could have been different. If the noise around Bob had been silenced, if the wrong voices hadn't drowned out the truth of what he needed most: rest, peace, and time. Until now, Ziggy never said any of this aloud. But something has shifted. The silence is no longer sustainable. The truths he's carried are beginning to emerge. And with that comes hope. Hope that the world might finally see Bob Marley not only as a revolutionary figure, a reggae legend, or a global icon, but as a complex, vulnerable human being. Through Ziggy's candid reflections and the release of the One Love biopic, there is a renewed effort to paint a fuller portrait, one that includes the struggles, the soul, and the relentless spirit of a man who fought, loved, suffered, and in the end, passed on not just music, but a mission to those he left behind. In 2024, the world saw the release of a powerful new biopic titled Bob Marley, One Love. But this wasn't just another music-themed movie. For Ziggy Marley, who played a crucial role as a hands-on producer alongside his sister Cedella and their mother Rita, the project served as something far more personal. It was a chance to clear up misconceptions, to cut through the mythology, and to finally show the full, raw, and nuanced human being behind the icon that so many think they already know. For Ziggy, telling this story was also an act of emotional bravery. It marked the first time he truly opened up, not through interviews or lyrics, but through the powerful lens of film. Through this project, he found a new way to express what had always been difficult to put into words. And he firmly believes that his father would have approved. He would laugh, but it'd be that kind of proud laugh, Ziggy explains. He always wanted to make a movie. He was so creative. He even talked about doing a Western. That tiny revelation, that Bob Marley secretly dreamed of directing a Western, pulls back the curtain on a deeply creative side of him that the world rarely saw. And that's precisely the goal of One Love, which stars Kingsley Ben-Adir as Bob and Lashana Lynch as Rita. The film doesn't just highlight his chart-topping hits or legendary performances. It dives into the personal struggles, the inner conflicts, and the rich relationships that shaped his life. This portrayal goes beyond the reggae image and reveals a man burdened by both personal demons and the expectations of an entire nation. There are parts of him people don't really know, Ziggy says, but now they will, and they'll be able to feel that connection. For him, that connection is everything. Over the years, he's watched the world turn his father into a symbol, adorning walls, playlists, and t-shirts, yet often missing the real man behind it all. The man who whispered those haunting last words from a hospital bed. On your way up, take me up. On your way down, don't let me down. Was far more layered than the legend suggests. This film, for Ziggy, isn't about fame, commercial success, or critical acclaim. It's about something far deeper. Preserving truth. It's about taking hold of the narrative before it vanishes completely into fable. And that meant facing some of the hardest memories he's ever had to revisit. Working through the script, seeing actors recreate moments from his father's life, reliving scenes that had only existed in his mind until now. It all took an emotional toll, but it was a toll worth paying. Living with the memories is one thing, Ziggy says, but putting them out into the world, letting everyone else see them, that's something else entirely. In opening up for this project, Ziggy has made a courageous leap toward truth and healing. He's not just revealing Bob Marley as a cultural legend, but as a real man, a father, a husband, a flawed human being with highs, lows, and an unmistakable spirit. While the title One Love speaks to unity, the heart of this story is about one life, told by the person who understood it in ways no biography ever could. And maybe, through this vulnerable telling, Ziggy will finally begin to heal from a loss that has loomed over most of his life. The thing he misses most isn't his father's genius or his wisdom. It's simply his presence. Daddy was fun, he reflects with a softness that only a son could express. And that absence, more than the legend, more than the music, is the weight Ziggy continues to carry. He did far more than I ever could, Ziggy Marley admits. You know what I mean? He accomplished so much. His legacy will live on forever. While the world recognizes Bob Marley as an eternal icon, what Ziggy misses most isn't the fame or the revolution. It's simply his father's presence. That absence goes beyond just someone not being in the room. It's emotional, it's spiritual, and it carved a lasting emptiness into his life. To millions, Bob Marley remains untouched by time, a cultural warrior, a messenger whose words still echo across generations. But to Ziggy, he wasn't just the legend. He was a man who never got the chance to fully grow into his future self. The grief isn't rooted only in death. It stems from a relationship that barely had the chance to form. Ziggy never had the luxury to deepen that bond, to absorb his father's wisdom, or to rely on him during life's toughest transitions. What was lost wasn't just a father figure. It was the simple, irreplaceable rhythm of daily life with a dad. That human side, the everyday moments, the voice in the room, those are what hurt the most to lose. Even now, when Ziggy visits his mother Rita's home, his father's voice is still in the air, literally. Bob's music plays throughout the house, as if he never really left. When I don't miss him, I listen to him, Ziggy says. It's become a quiet practice. a way of holding on to the presence that's felt but not truly there. It soothes, but it doesn't heal. Ziggy carries the belief that his father still lives on through him. His presence is inside me. I am a part of that presence, he says. Now and then, I catch glimpses. I see his mannerisms in myself. I feel his energy in my actions. But sensing him isn't the same as having him. That difference, that space between feeling and reality, is the ache that never fades. No amount of music, time, or public reverence has been able to completely fill it. There are moments on stage, especially when performing at venues like the Santa Barbara Bowl, when Ziggy feels something almost eerie. You get this little déjà vu feeling like, yeah, this is where my father once performed, he explains. And your mind starts to wander. You imagine him there, standing in the same spot, feeling what you're now feeling. It's surreal and powerful, but it also deepens the longing. Ziggy didn't remain silent all these years because he lacked something to share. The truth is, it's incredibly hard to speak when the entire world already thinks they know your story. Now that he's chosen to speak openly, what comes out is raw, heartfelt, and painfully clear. It hurts. Because Ziggy didn't just lose his father. He lost what could have been. He lost a future shaped by shared memories, not just inherited myth. He had to come of age in the shadow of a global symbol, a version of Bob that belonged more to history books and posters than to him. The world's Bob Marley was different from the father he barely had time to know. So now the question turns to you. Do you think Ziggy Marley did the right thing by revealing this deeper, more personal side of Bob Marley? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you in the next video.